The Radio Today podcast with Jen Seyderhelm.
Hello and welcome. Steve Ahern joins me again this week, and it's been every time I think we're going to have more mellow fortnight and radio news, it never is. So a couple of main things to talk about this week. First and foremost, Karl and Eddie have joined ARN. And the other one for me that I think is worth unpacking is that the ABC is utilising other social avenues. And there's been a fair bit of blowback on that, but I think unfairly. First, though, Steve, you've had a very lovely last couple of weeks.
Yes, I have. I've been in the Maldives at the Asia Media Summit. That's how they say it, Maldives, the local pronunciation. Us Aussies that talk about Maldives, well, I learnt the local pronunciation. I'll tell you about that in a moment. But first also, while I was there, I got a note from Ian Wright. Nice to get some feedback. I'm going to tell you what he said. He's on holidays. Hi, Ian. Hope you're having a nice holiday. But he took the trouble to send this message after the previous podcast. And he says, just stumbled across your excellent radio podcast of fact, opinion and speculation with Jen. A very balanced and informative listen. Thank you. Ian?
Thank you.
And then he says, just one audio typo. I love that term. Very polite. He didn't say you made a mistake. He called it an audio typo. Very gentle of you, Ian. Thank you. We were talking about 5AA. Anyway, Ian says, Rupert Murdoch's Adelaide newspaper launching pad was not the Adelaide Advertiser. His first paper was the News. The Adelaide Advertiser acquisition came in 1987. Thanks for that, Ian. You can hear Ian on Happy FM in Victor Harbour. And Ian is the perfect person to be on Happy FM because he's such a happy person who loves radio.
Oh, I really appreciate that, Ian. I love that too. I have a couple of other things that's just made me think of. Firstly, just this morning, news has come in that James Murdoch has purchased Vox Podcasts, which I think is something to watch going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Well, when the Murdochs start buying things, you know that there's a trend. So podcasts on the up even further.
Yes, I have further thoughts on that too. But the other thing that you've made me think of is that it is National Volunteer Week this week. And that's really on my mind for a couple of reasons. I am aware that some community radio stations are really struggling right now, and there's a lot of ways in which you can contribute that are not necessarily financial, but financial certainly helps. But the other thing, if you've got some time, is to have a look at some Monash Griffith University research that's come out this week about the impact of community radio music stations on the local industry.
And I saw your story on that. It's really significant, and it's so good that somebody's quantified the monetary value as well as the wider social value that community radio is doing to champion Australian music.
Yeah, and it's a really good read too. From so many different perspectives, grassroots effect of community radio picking up local artists of every genre is phenomenal, and the contribution to the industry is immense. So,
you know, I'm working on a story. It'll probably be up in the next week or so. But I've been talking to Johnny Chester and Normie Rowe, two greats of Australian music whose careers go back a long way. Anyway, they've got together and they've released a new single. And he contacted Radio Info because he wanted to make sure that all the radio stations in Australia know about it and hopefully give it a spin. In the conversations we've been having, he really recognises the value of community radio in artists like him. I mean, it's not a pop hit. It's never going to be a top 40 chart, but it's a good song that they've put out. And why wouldn't you play something by two Aussie greats? And he says, you know, community radio is certainly the sector that supports musicians like he and Normie.
Oh, that's really cool. I can't wait to hear the single. So let's start in the Maldives. What did you come away from the event with?
A tan? No, sorry. It was warm and it was beautiful. And I did go swimming every day before the conference, but there was hard work at the conference. One of the really significant sessions to me was a session where there were about 6 young media professionals, journalists, podcasters, radio people. One of the notable ones was a woman called Jacqueline Manabat, who used to work for ABS-CBN in the Philippines. And if you know anything about that radio station and journalistic output, it was closed, well, harassed at first and then closed down by the Duterte government. They reinvented themselves online, but they had to lose a lot of staff. And Jackie was one of those staff who lost her job. She was looking around, but then she started to think, I could do something in new journalism here. And she started on TikTok. Anyway, long story short, she now has a company called Amber Studios in the Philippines with 30 staff because of the success of new journalism targeting youth on youth platforms and in different ways. So she's one example of half a dozen really interesting people on this panel. You can read it. It's called It's Not About Information, It's About Context and Conversation. It's in our stories. Let me just pull out a few of the things because I was sitting there listening. I consider myself to be someone who's always wanting to have my finger on the pulse, and I really enjoyed the insights that came from these half dozen. So I'm just going to tell you a few things. Why do young people prefer to get news from social media? Well, the obvious one, it's handy, it's not costly, it's efficient, fast, and accessible. And of course, they're the generation that's grown up with their phones in front of their faces. It's just easy. Some other things they said were traditional media feels like it's too controlled. I prefer to get my news from influencers. Lesson for traditional radio newsrooms and TV news. It gives contextual content that's useful. And that was a theme that quite a few of them picked up. They were saying that we can get information anywhere now. Pick up our phone, it'll be on a text, it'll be on an app. So we can find out what's happening. But what we value, in their words, so talk about Gen Z generation here, was context. So we want to understand this and we want to see and hear how it's relevant for us. And that also struck me as something that is relevant for any radio station and any radio programmer, just to think it's not just about hitting the news items or mentioning what's on, especially for talk radio. Go wider. If your audience is hungry for understanding and context, then don't be afraid to give it to them. We don't always have to simplify things down, depending on the format, of course. If you've only got 30 seconds to talk about something, well, that's different. But if you're in a talk format, then the older generation and the younger generation are hungry for context and how is this relevant to me? On the social side, the way we repurpose what we already have from our newsrooms was also something that this session and a workshop that I conducted and a couple of other sections tackled. And that was exactly that. How can we rework what we've got? And in one of my sessions, I gave some examples of, let's say, influencers or social media reporters who are using the assets that they already have in their mainstream publications, and they were just putting the news story behind them. So they superimposed themselves over the text of the news story. They talked about it in 60 seconds, giving a really good, concise explanation. And what does this mean to me? One of those was housing prices, for instance. And then behind them, we could see the pictures that were in the story, key points, the title, and presumably that would drive people back to the story to read the whole thing. So I thought that was a good example, and it really linked with what these guys were saying. And not a lot of effort, because somebody in your reporting team's already written the story. It's already up there. You just have to find the angle and then quick script and super over that story. I think the dozen most useful points that those young broadcasters and social media publishers talked about, I think I captured them. So you can read the story.
Oh, I get that immediately. And it's something that the Daily Oz does so well here. And I was seeing that with the budget that just came out. What they were doing was bite-sized, relevant to their audience. And it was 60 seconds, but bang, done. Absolutely specific to who was reading their content. And I happened to listen to the Mudgee 11 o'clock news, and it was done by Diane Coveney-Garland, who I've got high regard for, out of the Sydney studios. The audio quality was great. There was not a single thing in that news bulletin that was relevant to Mudgee. And there's a contrast with what you've just said, that you can, in 60 seconds, point someone back to a longer story that gives more information, but you've got to have the relevance there in the first place.
Yeah. I'm really delighted to see Super Network starting to stream. I mean, they're just leaving crumbs on the table if they don't. I hope it works for them.
Me too. And I just also want to say that I know Mudgee has a local news service prior to when I had specifically listened.
Yeah, I think they have some local bulletins in their breakfast show.
They do, but
it's a fair point, you know.
The other thing that leads me to is what I think is a really significant story and a positive for the ABC is that they're starting to utilise other social avenues. This started at the start of this year. Actually, you were the one who flagged that ABC were starting to were removing their platforms from iHeart and focusing on ABC Listen. What I read in your story was the underlying point was that they were having people who were having issues with the data, so they were not being able to really check who was listening, and people were having issues with dropouts and so on. So it made sense to point people back just to their own platform. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary. And also what sits behind that is owning your own audience too. iHeart is a different matter because at least it's a radio company, but when we're on social platforms, who owns the audience? Well, it's Mark Zuckerberg or it's Elon Musk or something like that. And we're just providing content for them. So, it's about a bigger strategy of trying to own your own audience, but being on enough platforms where the new audience is so that you bring familiarity of your presenter names and of your values.
And coming back to what you just said then about who owns the major platforms and how so much is now owned by Meta, Zuckerberg or Musk, the ABC has made the interesting step of announcing on X that if people were wondering where all their news stories had gone, their current up-to-date news stories, they were now releasing them on Blue Sky. Many people will not be aware of Blue Sky, and indeed there were lots of comments. Strangely, Steve, I got pointed this out. Someone shared this post from the ABC, but I couldn't see the comments or comment on the ABC's post. It wouldn't let me, which is also strange. But so what they're doing now is they're doing all their current, what's happening in the world are being released on Blue Sky, which was created as a competitor to Twitter, what is now X. This got a lot of people really, they couldn't fathom why the ABC would do this when they've only, at that initial point, only had like 600 followers on Blue Sky. But for me, I think it's such a positive step because if Elon Musk doesn't care what we do in Australia, I don't believe, but on Blue Sky, they would have a lot more, there is less mass consumption there. So their news stories are going to be seen more often, for one thing. And it's not like they've made it more difficult or expensive. Blue Sky is free. It's, freely accessible. You can argue that it's left or right leaning. Each of those platforms have plenty of people from either side who are stating their cases. But I thought, Steve, it was a great thing for competition that the ABC have said, we are here now. When TikTok first started, yes, we were all kind of like, oh, it's another platform. But look how easily we've all moved, and you just said this, moved on to TikTok because it's now where all the young people are creating, etc. Blue Sky can be the same. It is not owned by Elon Musk, And I think it's great that the ABC are actively looking to try and find other places to be that are not Meta or Elon Musk owned. And the other thing that the ABC have done this week, which I didn't know about at all as an option, was that ABC Pacific have chosen to put a lot of their programs on the WhatsApp channel link. So if you have WhatsApp and you go into settings, they now have a channel platform and you can be on that channel, and it is Meta owned, but different to Facebook or Instagram, you can be private about it. People don't know who you're following. They don't know what you're watching. And you don't have to sort of confirm your buy-in via, if you like this, you're going to like this. You can choose what you consume. So I kind of looked at that for ABC Pacific and thought, well, there's another option I didn't even know about until this week for other media companies to present their news and options.
That resonates with some of the other topics we were talking about at the Asia Media Summit, particularly to do with public service media, which is really in the rest of the world how they describe it. We call the ABC a national broadcaster or public broadcaster, but the current term that most people are using is public service media, which I quite like. I think it describes what it does. It's a public service. And once you categorize a public-owned channel like that, then it's much easier to describe. If you just say it's a national broadcaster, sure, but when you consider it's a public service that the ABC, in our case, is performing, it's easy. People get that. Like, what other public services do we have? Well, we have hospitals and we have schools. You wouldn't be closing those down. You want them to be as efficient and working well as possible, even though you may not want to turn up to hospital every day. You hope you don't have to be there, but when you have to go, you want it to be a good hospital that works, that's efficient, that will get the service that you want. So I quite like that. And picking up your points further, well, on the platform point, very interesting conversation I had with the head of the Tanzania Broadcasting Corporation, and she was telling me about one of their stations, Bongo FM, which streams via social media platforms. That is their streaming. And then we had that debate of, well, who owns your audience and how much do you get? Because they didn't have a lot of money to invest, and their population in Tanzania is mostly on social media. In fact, to some people, that is the internet. Facebook or Instagram is the internet as far as many people are concerned, and it's a country where literacy is not that high. But it's their way of reaching everybody with very little cost to them, apart from streaming rights payments, which they do. And I thought, okay, well, if you haven't got the infrastructure to have your own streaming, then there was a way that people were doing it. I think broadcasters, and especially public broadcasters, should be on there, even if it's simply to make sure that there's a voice of reason and balance and accuracy in those seas of nonsense and slop that are sometimes in some of those feeds.
Yeah. And something you said that you'd got from the conference as well is the things that are important, Steve, is that it's not costly, it's fast, it's easily accessible. And for me, the ABC being on Blue Sky and being on WhatsApp is all of those things.
Yep.
None of them are expensive or costly to get in the first place. We all have a phone to start with, and they're fast to access. And particularly, I suppose my point is, because they're new iterations that a lot of people aren't looking at, it does mean that the ABC can be more front and centre because they're ahead of other people joining it, which I think is also important and relevant with this decision.
And isn't it good to see our national broadcaster getting out in front? I always think that if you have a broadcaster, particularly a national public service broadcaster, you have to, of course, put your resources where the audience is. So you have to keep doing radio and keep doing television, but you need some small, fast, nimble teams inside the broadcaster to just run ahead and see what's ahead. Make some mistakes, try things, and then those things become the strategy of the future for those broadcasters.
I don't think these are high-risk opportunities. I'm on board with them, and I think it's a really great thing to see actively being put out there. So as you were heading home from the Maldives, Karl Stefanovic and Eddie Maguire were announced to be joining ARN. Karl was not a surprise. There was a lot of speculation about that. Eddie was a surprise, and increasingly so now that I've heard and read a few places that the two of them have been shopping this show around for quite some time. How do you feel? What do you think about this?
I think every broadcaster who can get high-profile personalities for whatever is the right price should do that, because no doubt personalities attract audiences. And when you lose them, let's not mention K&J, but when you lose them, then you're going to lose people who were attracted to those personalities. So from that strategy makes absolute sense. Both Karl and Eddie are huge personalities. The nice thing about it is that Eddie is a Melbourne personality and an AFL personality. So with the networking that's going on in that network between Sydney and Melbourne, you never want it to seem like everything's coming from just one place. And if that place is head office in Sydney, Melbourne listeners will not be happy about that. So strategically, good move. I do wonder how they'll fit. I guess it depends where they're going to be placed. And your article said some of that, but we don't really know exactly how they're going to be used in the long term. They both work well in breakfast time, don't they? Because they're both breakfast people. We know that Eddie was a hit on Triple M, so we know that he could be part of an ongoing breakfast team. You can see that there's a strategy emerging. They're getting the pieces in place. When I was talking to Dave Cameron after the last survey, he said that they were not going to rush. They were going to put things in place. They were going to think about their formats, and they were going to do it in their time. So I guess this is all part of how that's going to play out, and we'll see it as it goes.
I think this is the start of what 2027 is going to look like. What you've said is valid. We know that Karl's contract on Today runs out in December this year. So he will either continue doing that if he re-signs, or he will do something else, and it will have to be a significant something else. So I feel that this is a testing of the water where they will fit to next year. And then that brings me to, I can't fathom them on KISS. That can't work it's not the audience.
No, that's exactly right. Neither of them would fit the current KISS audience, even though they are high-profile personalities. So, yes, where will they sit and what will they do? Will KISS change its format?
Oh, but then I feel like it's too close to what they're doing with gold. Why have two gold-like products?
Yeah, well, I guess the answer to why is if Hit is going to become successful, then they could position KISS in a format up against Hit. Kyle and Jackie don't fit either with the rest of the music for the rest of the day on the KISS format. It's just that Kyle and Jackie were just high-profile live show leaders, and then the rest of the station sounded different.
What they did well was have around them, the Kyle and Jackie O team did speak to young people.
Yes, actually, that's a very good point. And I've got to say, I have been dropping in and out listening. All that team was working really hard. Mikey there, Pete, he's gone across to the other network, but all the rest of the team, they're still on, they're still bringing their energy. And I've liked the female co-host, Bianca Dye, is on this week, and I think she brings amazing energy and fun. So I've been pretty impressed with what she's been doing.
The other thing with this decision is worth mentioning and exploring a bit further is so Nine has sold their radio assets. It's now tapped. That's done. But Michael Stevenson, of course, is a product of Nine. And many people have said this was sort of Dave Cameron's doing this decision in the first place, but it looks much more like a Michael Stevenson kind of decision.
Yes, for sure. I mean, Michael has the connections to these two television guys, and it's a television decision about personalities. I totally agree with you. I'm sure the crux of the idea is Michael Stevenson.
Agreed. So little extra pieces of the puzzle is that the wonderful Tony Tenalia, who has been number one in that 12 till 3 slot for a very long period of time, Tony's anchoring that show. I just parked that there because it's going to air as well on Stan and Nine now. So Nine, very smart. They've got rid of their radio stations, but they're dipping their toe back in the water, Steve. And so this could be, with ARN wanting to be an entertainment business, it could be a breakfast show of the future that has its audio, has its streaming, has its live. So all three at the same time. That's what I think we're potentially looking at.
My question again is, which format would it fit in? But it would certainly fit in on any vision format, streamed on YouTube and Nine Now or wherever you might want to stream it. That would fit and that would work. Those two together will be a really interesting combination, I think.
So there's lots to think about there, but it does feel like Nine, after dropping their radio stations, is certainly looking towards a play back into it for next year in some fashion, in some way. And the other thing I'm just going to mention is that if this show doesn't rate very well for the rest of this year, hypothetically, one of the things that the network can say is, but you should see our television and streaming numbers. They're amazing, because we won't have access to we will to the streaming to some extent, but the television numbers we won't have in the radio ratings. So they can quietly build across this year and just see what it looks like, and then where it might work next year. But there is some certainty in my mind that this is a step towards what a breakfast show might look like in 2027.
I look forward to seeing and hearing what they're going to do.
Steve, I want to wrap up today with a slightly controversial thought that sort of struck me today. I don't know if you've seen, but everywhere as we're recording this, the news is on every platform that Radio Caroline, the good old-fashioned pirate radio station, accidentally announced the death of King Charles. They made a public apology. The actual audio of it happening, no one has. And I wonder, Steve, if this is just the biggest bit of reminder of Radio Caroline's existence, and it's a way of creating their profile. Because, Steve, like, if your radio station shut down, if any radio station shut down, the thing that it wouldn't revert to would be the announcement of the death of the king, would it?
No, that's right. How true. It could be, maybe it's a good publicity stunt. It is everyone's nightmare, including diplomats and the Foreign Office when it comes to the royals. There are death kits in every consulate and embassy around the world for the various members of the royal family, and they're under lock and key and, very tightly guarded, because if somebody made a mistake and released something or whatever, then it would just go berserk. If it was deliberate and if they wanted to make a splash, they've chosen a topic that everybody in Britain knows is the topic to get talkability.
I just can't believe that any radio station would not have it under lock and key. I just don't believe it would be a default if the system went down.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't have your emergency tape.
No, your emergency tape wouldn't have that sort of thing, would it?
No, and I was laughing over it because I worked at a talk station and a music station. And the music station's emergency tape started with Afternoon Delight by the Starland Vocal Band. And any time I heard that station, because I'd be monitoring the talk station at the same time, but like I would, as soon as it still triggers me to this day, if I hear Afternoon Delight, I think that something's gone wrong and I have that urge to go running. So this whole story, Steve, feels like a really, really impressive media stunt.
Oh, well, good luck to them if it is. Hey, talking of emergency tapes, my favourite emergency tape, whenever I get the chance to choose what's going to be on it, I always put radio songs on because there's so many songs about radio. The first one is always the Masters Apprentices, Aussie group, Turn Up Your Radio. And yes, when I hear that, I know that the station is off and it's a message to everybody, like, turn up your radio. Is it on? Is it on? And you can put a fun playlist together of radio songs. One time, the techs were enjoying it so much, they left it off for a little while till a couple of their favourite songs played, and then they switched back the feed on.
Do you have those dreams? Do you have the dreams where
I do, yeah. The emergency tape triggers and you're running down a corridor trying to get to the studio, put the needle back on the record player or press the big green button. And if it's not that, you're then in your dream zooming down the line to the transmitter site to push some buttons and turn the transmitters back on. Oh, it's a radio announcer's nightmare dream.
I've had one where all I had to play was Lionel Richie's Say You, Say Me. I played it in my dream over and over again because I just didn't know what else to do. And then I remembered I could have turned the microphone on and actually talked, but instead I played Lionel Richie. And my favourite, and I'll just pay credit to Pete Davidson, who I was working with at the time. I was going to do my first news bulletin, very anxious about reading the news. And the night before I was due to do it, I dreamt that I'd gone in to Pete to do the news, and Pete said, we're doing things differently. Now when you do your news bulletin, you have to make a plasticine model of the story at the same time. The first story was a house fire. I'm trying to make this plasticine model at the same time, and I couldn't get it finished by the time I'd finished saying the story, and I had to move on to the next plasticine model. And, that's a stressed dream for the ages. Radio nightmares. Gosh, what a topic. I wonder if anyone will send us their radio nightmare story for next podcast. Yes, I would love to hear other people's radio nightmare stories along the same line as mine. I can't hear Lionel Richie's Say You, Say Me. Oh, no. That's like the Goodies. Remember a long time ago, the Goodies had that episode where they were radio announcers and the only song they had was A Walk in the Black Forest and they had to keep playing it. So I think that's better than Lionel Richie. I would hate to be stuck with Lionel Richie. And the RCS Media Monitor's National Airplay Chart Song of the Week is not going to be A Walk in the Black Forest or anything from Lionel Richie, but it is a song with some history. About 12 years ago now, Martin Garrix and Ed Sheeran, Martin is an EDM dance producer, Ed Sheeran is Ed Sheeran, came together and released a song, or a song was put together that Martin Garrix performed in concert, but they couldn't release it because of their respective record companies never being able to sort of agree on some path forward. Fast forward to 2026, and it was teased that this song that's had various iterations, apparently Martin Garrix has played with it and tweaked it 1,000 times, has finally been released. It's called Repeat It, and it had 223 spins on Australian radio this week. My lungs are screaming, this heart is bleeding, well, I love this feeling, so rewind, repeat it. One reminder, I know we have some Asian radio listeners here and podcast listeners in Asia. The Asia Podcast Awards are going to be open for entries very soon in the next few days. So look out for that and get your entries in. And they will be announced at Radio Days Asia in Jakarta in September. And we'll catch you next time. In the interim, there's going to be the Australian Audio Awards for all the people who are nominated for that, who are part of the shortlist. Good luck. Yes, good luck. We'll see you there Thursday afternoon, the 28th of May. It's going to be a good night. Still some tickets. Get them.
Radio Today with Jen Seyderhelm. Find more at radiotoday.com.au.
radiotoday.com.au